Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. Hey guys, have you heard about the Haven app from the guys over at Open Bazaar? Download Haven now for iOS and Android. Go to gethaven.app. Haven is the world's first privacy-focused shopping application for iOS and Android devices. Why use apps that spy on you? Shop, chat, and send cryptocurrencies privately using Haven. Haven gives you a shopping marketplace, social posts, private chat, and a powerful cryptocurrency multi-wallet all in one mobile app. Download Haven now for iOS and Android. Go to gethaven.app/Tatiana for $5 off. This episode of The Tatiana Show is brought to you by Vaultoro. Vaultoro is a gold hedging solution for the crypto community. One of the challenges of investing in cryptocurrencies is dealing with volatility. Keeping a diversified portfolio is a key to healthy returns. I keep about 10% of my crypto assets in gold using Vaultoro. Vaultoro allows me to open a gold wallet in seconds where I can easily trade with cryptos and gold. What I like about using Vaultoro instead of Tether is that the gold in my Vaultoro wallet is insured, audited, vaulted in Switzerland, and unlike fiat money, gold has increased in value for the last 20 years. Visit vaultoro.gold/Tatiana today and get zero trading fees for the first 3 months. That is vault, like a gold vault, and oro, which is Spanish for gold. Vaultoro, ole! Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. I'm very happy to be joined today by Bruce Fenton, somebody who's been a staple in the crypto community for many years now. I'm joined by my co-host, Josh Shigala of Vaultoro. Hey, Josh, I know you are keeping quite busy with what's going on over at Vaultoro this week. Tell me how you're doing.
Oh man, I've never been so stressed in my life. It's amazing. I mean, you know, it's just a lot of stuff happening with the upgrade. You know, we've been running Vaultoro for the last 5 years, and we decided to rewrite the entire thing from the ground up. So, and the launch, you know, moving all the user data across to a whole new system was trickier than we thought, and you know, definitely we'll do it different next time. But we're still down, but it's coming along good, and we should have withdrawals and everything available. You know, as we know, crypto is just very slippery, so everything's got to be checked, double checked, triple checked before we go live with it, and have all checks and balances and all this stuff. But yeah, it's that's what it is, and you know, that's the world of crypto. We now have these rare assets, so computer security is bumped up to the next level that humans have never experienced before.
Are you running the campaign right now on Bank to the Future?
Yeah, we are. It is live, but we haven't really been marketing it until we have the platform fully upgraded, because we want to. But yeah, it's live, and people can check it out and start you know, checking out our business model and seeing if they are interested in equity. Awesome.
Very cool. So I guess we can start the show in just a second. I just wanted to say thank you to our sponsors over at Salt Lending, the Haven app, of course, and our friends over at Vaultoro. So thanks, guys, for sponsoring the Tatiana Show, which you can find at thetatianashow.com and listen on Tuesdays, sometimes Thursdays, or another random day. And if you're interested in something a little bit different, Proof of Love, proofoflovecast.com is a show that I'm doing with Stephanie Murphy from Let's Talk Bitcoin and Lauren Kasovitz. We talk about relationships, emotional intelligence, personal growth, different kinds of things to make a more well-rounded tech entrepreneur. So check that out. All right. Thanks so much, Bruce, for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So we've known each other for a really long time. You're a crypto OG. But for those people that are not really familiar with you and your background, if you could walk us through sort of what were you doing before you got into the crypto space, because I know that that's related to what you're kind of refocusing on now, but what inspired you? Because you've got your political side, you've got your financial background. Give us a little slice of Bruce Fenton's life up till now.
Yeah, sure. Well, my mom was a financial advisor and a stockbroker starting back in 1977 when I was a little kid. And so I was kind of raised in brokerage firms, you know, playing on the floor and then playing with the computer. And then I got my first job when I was 14, and then I joined the Navy, and I got out, and at 19 I got my Series 7 and ended up working at Morgan Stanley, became a vice president, one of the youngest vice presidents, and then I started my own firm and had a pretty varied career over 20 years, serving everybody from doing development work for some of the poorest people in the world and working with just regular Americans doing 401k plans and things like that, all the way on up to some of the largest investors in the world, some sovereign wealth funds, and ultra wealthy decabillionaire type of people. And I had always been interested in emerging markets and emerging technology. What was new, what was next, whether that was China or the Middle East or the internet or whatever. And I was also very interested in free market economics and kind of an overall tech geek. So when I first heard about Bitcoin around 2012, it was sort of the convergence of all the things that I thought was interesting: economics, a little bit of politics, technology, decentralization, and I became pretty fascinated, and then ended up jumping into that full time. And I've been focused in this crazy space for the last 7 years or so full time.
What made you interested in Austrian economics of all things? Because not everybody necessarily learns about that. They might be interested in regular economics, but where did you get off the path politically in order to even know about that kind of stuff?
I think it was sort of having some of the things that I always kind of knew and believed. My mom, with her background, influenced me a lot. She was a very hard worker. She had a lot of disadvantages. Even just being a woman back in the 70s was a disadvantage in her job. And she worked very hard. And one thing that she did as an assistant manager, she would take people who were kind of like her and bring them out of really poverty in some cases and help them get really good jobs. So I was always and she was very much against sort of the welfare system, not because she was trying to be evil, but just because she felt that it wasn't the thing that was going to help people. She really felt that having better skills was going to help people. So I had kind of some of these internalized beliefs very early, even before I knew what Austrian economics was. And then, like a lot of people, I think my first real exposure of somebody who kind of crystallized it was Ron Paul. And a little bit, although I don't agree with everything he said, but Milton Friedman, had some interesting principles. And those are the things that, especially Ron Paul, kind of led me down this path of thinking about freedom. And I remember very early, one of the first times I heard Ron Paul, and somebody said, well, they were talking about all the problems in the world, and they said, well, what's your answer? And he said, well, my answer would be more freedom. And I thought that was really silly at first. I thought, oh, that's just a silly politician answer. But now that's exactly the answer I would give. It takes a little bit of time to kind of learn this sort of thing and appreciate it. But that was my journey. And then, like a lot of people, once I started learning more, and then I hung around with some of the groups and went to Pork Fest, which I know you're a regular at, and kind of evolved my beliefs over time.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear that from you, Bruce, because of course I've known of you for a long time. You've been there since, oh God, I don't even know when anymore, but I think it was like when the Bitcoin Foundation first formed, and I donated anonymously to that thing, and there was a whole lot of kerfuffle. And I couldn't really remember. I think that was when Brock got kicked out or something. And anyway, and then later it's evolved so much, but then in the middle we had like things like InstaWallet and stuff, crash and go down, and then Mt. Gox, and then more and more of these services. Where the press would say, Bitcoin has been hacked, or the CEO of Bitcoin has. And now we're getting to the point where the media actually understand crypto and understand what the blockchain is. And seeing someone that's been there from day one, how do you find it different from back in the day to what it is now? Are you still just as excited about crypto, even though there is all of this security that comes with it, computer security, or do you feel that there's a long way to go before mass adoption?
I think both. I think I'm very excited, probably as excited as I've ever been, but I've been around so long that I'm also more cautious, more jaded. I've seen so many scams and so many bad ideas, and there's this whole batch of newcomers who've been in for kind of 2 years or less who are always kind of schooling me and scolding me on social media. I said something the other day. I said Bitcoin has pretty good security, and I had a bunch of people say, "Well, it's not just pretty good, Bruce. It's the best there is." So I kind of laughed because I think that at least in my case, I've been around long enough. I'm very skeptical of everything, even Bitcoin. I'm a very big fan of Bitcoin. It's I think it's the strongest chain by far.
Yep.
But we haven't won yet. We've got a long way to go if we want to replace the Fed and these kind of things, and it may never even happen. We've certainly done a lot of amazing things, but I'm more cautious. I'm cautious about hype and kind of the Lambo culture, and I think a lot of people who were in the early days missed some of the aspects where it was really just a bunch of excited people who cared about new ideas and changing the world.
Yes.
Now we have all this money involved and all these people involved. There's a lot of good with that too. I mean, that's great, but there is some drawbacks to it that you got to kind of balance out.
Oh, absolutely. When this whole Lambo meme started taking off, it sort of came along with with meetups becoming regulation meetups, basically, where regulators would come in. Everyone's so excited about the regulators to come into the space. I remember just thinking, what has Bitcoin become? We're all obsessed with Lambos and regulators. But then I sort of sat back and thought, you know what, this is just the natural progression where we're heading towards mainstream, and with mainstream comes, control freaks and idiots. Quite frankly.
Exactly.
But back to your pretty good, example there. I mean, there was a reason why Zimmerman called PGP pretty good privacy. Even though it's still the best we've got, sort of on a consumer level, it's still called pretty good privacy, PGP.
Yeah, that's exactly why I use that phrase, because I'm very cautious. I'm a big believer in Bitcoin, but I'm also very cautious to be, part of it is from being a financial advisor so long. I had it trained in my head that you always say, past performance doesn't guarantee future results. Don't put anything that you can't afford to lose. And that's not just because I'm trying to follow some regulation. In many cases, I'm not even governed by a regulation regarding Bitcoin. It's really just because that's a prudent thing. There's a lot of people that really shouldn't be putting their life savings in this. It is a risky speculative asset, particularly if they have their expenses denominated in fiat. So part of it, and even from a computer standpoint, if you talk to the really, really smart computer scientists, they'll say that Bitcoin is not immutable. It's very hard to change. It's not impossible to change. It's just very, very hard. Just because it's the best coin that we have doesn't mean that it's flawless. There is flaws, and any good computer scientist, I'm not a computer scientist, but any of the really good computer scientists, that's all they think about is all the ways that you could wreck it and all the flaws and everything else. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means that it's being realistic and practicing good OPSEC, planning on, what is the worst case scenario and what could happen. If we don't think like that, that's dangerous. And there's some kind of a little bit of a tribal mentality of sort of the rah-rah Lamborghini crowd that, they just want to hear about how it's going to go to $1 million a coin, and they don't really care about anything else, including the security, which is counterproductive in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're talking about other chains as well. One of the things, the pet peeves that I've hated is that people just call it blockchain without putting a the or a or blockchains at the end. But anyway, what is, you mentioned you are excited about some other projects. What other projects do you feel, because I still feel that blockchains, the best use of a blockchain is still currency, by far. And the whole meme of like blockchain interesting, Bitcoin not that interesting is just a ridiculous farce put forth by fools. What examples of maybe even other cryptos in terms of currencies or other crypto projects do you find interesting?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have a little bit different sort of outlook than a lot of people. Maybe it's because of coming from a trading background where I have this sort of core belief that, the more stuff that's traded, the better. It doesn't mean it's good, but I wouldn't want to see markets eliminate penny stocks, for example, even though most of them are junk. And certainly most ICOs and most of the fundraise projects and probably more than 90% of coin market cap is junk. But I don't have I've met members of the Taliban, so I have a pretty high bar of who I think is evil. I don't think somebody's evil just because they have a different coin or a different project that they like. I tend to be more of an open kind of citizen of the world kind of attitude where I have a very high bar before I'm going to call somebody evil or really dislike them. So I don't have this sort of hatred towards any other project or coin. And I absolutely agree. I think Bitcoin is money and is the best form of money, and it's the best chance of any crypto asset or digital asset to be the global money, which is exactly a Bitcoin maximalist view. I think the only thing I would differ with some of my sort of fellow maximalists is that I also think that some of these other applications keyword is might be useful for some other things like securities, something where you need to transfer something of value from one party to another without using a trusted party could be useful. And there's also been, I get a lot of pitches and things, there's been things that I thought were really stupid ideas, and then I've heard pitches and a lot of them really are stupid ideas, but every once in a while here's something where I'm very closed-minded to it. I'm like, voting on the blockchain, I don't believe it. Healthcare on the blockchain, don't believe it. Somebody was talking about shipping containers. These things that I've been skeptical of, but in all of those cases, I've seen something where the people who really, really know the industry well will make a case for it. And I'll say, oh, okay, maybe that's not a solution, but I can at least see where you're going. And that's the way I feel about securities. Coming from the securities business, I know that business pretty well, and I know how the behind-the-scenes machinations of DTCC and CD & Co. and Euroclear and these things work, and how it really relies heavily on these trusted third parties. And I'm convinced that could be solved. So the bigger broad picture is, I think that the best application hopefully is money, and certainly the best coin and project and blockchain is Bitcoin. But I also am open-minded to some of these other things, and I'm particularly interested in securities. And as far as which coins or projects, that's a little tricky. They're all, I'm always very cautious to say they're all risky. I'm not recommending to buy them or anything, but I think there's a lot of interesting projects out there. It's been great to see what Ethereum has done. Ethereum, has some scaling issues and other things like that, but it's certainly built a big community. It's proven that you can issue tokens on it. There's a lot of people working on it. There's a lot of other interesting projects. Ethereum Classic, a lot of different projects out there that different people are working on, and offshoots of Bitcoin, side chains, RSK, Blockstream's Liquid Network, and other coins, Ravencoin, Litecoin, Monero. I tend to gravitate more towards the sort of fair launch, more cypherpunk kind of projects, which, there's this other meme that's sort of like Bitcoin is the only fair thing and everything else is a scam that's centralized. And that's not the case. It's not the case in Monero, even Litecoin. Charlie Lee is sort of a nominal figurehead, but it really is an open source, decentralized project. You can argue you don't like it, or you can argue it's not going to work or whatever, but you can't really argue, in my opinion, I don't think you can argue it's a scam. It's pretty transparent about what it is. So that's the other thing I have, although there are a ton of scams in the space, I don't think, I don't buy this sort of meme that everything is a scam.
Yeah, and I think it diminishes real scams. That's the thing. If you just say everything's a scam that's not Bitcoin, or not your project, then you diminish real scams like OneCoin or whatever. When they come along and you're trying to warn people and they're like, oh, you just don't like this guy. It sort of reduces the value of that term when there really are scams, and they're really important to point out. And it's one of these things. I mean, we work in the gold industry, and just to back it up a bit, we've traded gold and Bitcoin on Vaultoro we launched like almost 5 years ago, and we didn't tokenize the gold until like recently decided to. And the reason why is because we just didn't need to. Bitcoin was good enough, and if you wanted to hedge it into a solid, allocated, insured, in order to hard asset, you could just trade it for that on an order book, and boom, there it's done, and then trade it back to Bitcoin when you wanted to. But the only reason we started looking at it is when another major exchange came to us and said, well, we want to offer it too. Can we look at sharing order books? And that's when I started thinking, maybe, because we looked at the problems of like lag problems and high frequency trading bots taking advantage of like a shared order book between an exchange in San Fran and an exchange over here in Europe. And so then it was like, well, it probably is easier to tokenize the settlement paperwork or the bailment contract and have that as a smart contract. And that's sort of these sort of use cases are still are there, but they have to be done well. And there are people that will just come out and scream scam without properly understanding the legals behind it. And just because and God, the gold industry is fraught full of scams more than the Bitcoin industry for 3,000 years. There's been scams after scams. So it's a very difficult thing. Anywhere where there's value, there will be scammers. So, but yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, I've heard people say, one of my pet peeves, there's people who say all digital assets are scams. And usually I say, well, what do you mean by digital assets? And some people say, well, everything, every single thing. I say, well, what about a security token? And there are people, and I could find them right on Twitter, who say, yes, everything is a scam other than Bitcoin and even security tokens. And to me, that's just crazy. I said, well, what if Google or Apple tomorrow said, hey, we're launching a security token for 10% of our stock, $100 billion worth of stock, and it's a preferred stock, and it trades as a token. Is that a scam? Is that all of a sudden mean? I mean, what if it was 100% of their stock? What if Apple just said, you know what, we're tired of the U.S. stock exchange. We love this token thing. We're going to tokenize all our stock. Does that mean Apple is suddenly a scam? Is Apple worth zero? It's just, you've got to look at the underlying asset and what the terms are and what it is. And what it's backed by. And also, it doesn't really matter too much, because even if you think something is terrible and it's not a security, something like, Monero is not a security. It's not tied to Apple or anything. And somebody could say, well, it's I don't like it, but it doesn't really matter because the market says it has value and somebody's buying it. And interestingly, they're often using Bitcoin to do these trades. So I tend to be more kind of, free market and open-minded about these kind of things. I want to let everybody buy what they want and do what they want. And I think a rising tide lifts all boats. I don't view it as a zero-sum game where it's like, I don't buy the argument that, alts have drawn away from Bitcoin talent. I think that, the growth of Ethereum and all of these, and even bad projects, I think that helps good projects because there's a differentiator. If there was only one coin out there, I don't think people would be so concerned about supply and security and these kind of things. But when you see something that you can contrast it to, that actually, in my opinion, helps the whole ecosystem. And then we get more and more good projects, and it helps the good projects grow even further.
Yeah, I mean, I consider myself, or both Tatiana and I, we've talked about competition maximalism really is the term that I like because it's all about competition. We shouldn't be like everything else is crap. I mean, there's some amazing cryptography coming out of the team at Dash as well. Like there's great cryptography coming out of Ethereum. You're right. We can't just neg everything, and that's for sure.
Yeah, I like that competition maximalism. That sounds great.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears a little bit here because, Bruce, you're well known for setting up Satoshi Roundtable for many years now. And maybe you could talk a little bit about how that's evolved into what you're doing in New Hampshire. Have you been living in New Hampshire for a long time? Did you move up there for the Free State Project?
We did. We were originally inspired by the Free State Project, and we signed it about, 5 years ago or so, and we moved about 2 years ago from Massachusetts, also known as Taxachusetts, which is one of the more heavy-handed statist states. And going to one of the more free states, we definitely could see a difference. Everything from, when you're moving in, you have less paperwork, and just little things like when you go to the gas station or if you want to light off fireworks or something like that, it's just more noticeable. But yeah, we moved up partly because of that. We looked all over the world. We had lived overseas. We lived in the Middle East. We've traveled to Asia, and we were pretty much open-minded to go anywhere. And we ended up moving sort of right next door for a lot of reasons. It's got proximity to an international airport, which is super key with my travel. And it's got a great crypto and Bitcoin and libertarian anarchist community, a lot of really good people, great standard of living, and pretty low cost, no taxes. The tax advantage is a huge thing. So yeah, we moved a couple years ago, and we're trying to build sort of something as an extension to kind of the roundtable sort of style of events, which is the roundtable is, I would say, best characterized by being kind of one of the most decentralized sort of unconference kind of things, and its feel is a lot of what we're talking about. It's a feel of open competition. It's probably one of the only events that gets such a varied group of people. We've had Adam Back and Roger Ver at the same event. We've had these people that are from sort of different tribes or camps that go there and tend to have pretty productive discussions and get along. Part of that is because of the way we do the format. to make it easy for people to hang out with who they want and break off into the groups that they want. And so we wanted to kind of extend that, and we have this farm in New Hampshire. It's on about 80 acres, bordering hundreds more acres of nature preserve and wildlife preserve on the saltwater Great Bay, which is right there with the Atlantic Ocean access. And we're trying to build that, and sort of the town where our offices is, which is Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We're trying to build that into kind of a community place that people can go. I think events have been really successful in this industry because it is decentralized, and it's one of the only opportunities people have to go. And, there is no water cooler at the corporate headquarters, so going to an event is the only time you have to see people face to face. So we're trying to build that out. Hopefully it'll be convenient enough with Boston where people can come up, hang out in Portsmouth. It's kind of a cool, fun town. It's sort of touristy. There's a lot of good restaurants. I feel like it has all the benefits of a big city, but it's a smaller town, so you don't have a lot of the disadvantages. But it's got, you've got a variety of restaurants and cool bars and places to hang out. And there's plenty of 1-star or 5-star, depending what your sort of taste and budget are. And it just kind of has a cool sort of freedom feel. You see granite carvings all over that say "Live Free or Die," which is our state motto, and that kind of thing. And then the farm, sort of as a venue, we have a couple venues. One is the Wentworth Hotel, and then the other is this farm, which I think there's something nice about being in nature and just kind of being able to walk around, particularly people who live in cities, people in San Francisco or New York, to be able to be out in a relaxing nature kind of setting. And so what we're hoping to do is just create a sort of safe space and a spot that people can come to. I'm trying to encourage other people to, if especially for the first year, we'll probably do it for free for almost anybody who wants to use a venue. If somebody wants to host something, we want to encourage people to say, go ahead and host your event there. Because I'd love to see an event there every month. We don't have the resources and time to host that many events. Hosting events is a lot of work, as I'm sure you know, getting the people and everything together. But what I have done is reached out to a couple people who I know who host events or teach courses or something. Say, hey, if you want to use this venue and you want to host an event, especially a smaller event like 50 people or less, it's sort of a sweet spot. You could do quite a bit larger, or you could do smaller. And we might do real small events, like 12 people, and just talk about a very narrow topic, like, securities on the Liquid network, or some aspect of Ethereum scaling, or something like that, and just try and get 12 people together. And we're trying to just make an easy space that people can use, and I'm hoping that other people will use it and maybe host a couple of their own events. I'd love to see, a point where we have, maybe a half dozen people in a year who kind of each host, one event a year. And it's a cool spot. So on October 19th, we're having kind of an open community meetup and mini conference there, one-day conference. And so hopefully when people see it and they like it, they say, oh, this is something that I'd like to participate in. And we'll build that kind of community around it. So I'm really excited about that. I've always loved spaces like that. And there's a few different groups and different people in the space that have, kind of carved out these interesting locations that has worked well, again, because it's this sort of decentralized space. So having a cool location and venue that people can go to, I think is a nice thing. So we're really excited about that.
How far is it from New York? That's such a great resource. I can already think of a few different people that might want to take advantage of it.
I think you can fly in to either Manchester or Boston, and it's about a 45-minute drive from Manchester, maybe an hour and 20 minutes from Boston. From New York, it's only an hour flight. Or you could take the train. It'd be about a 4-hour train stop. The train goes right into the town. I think it might stop in Boston first and then go through, but it's pretty convenient. Basically you plan on an hour and 20 minutes from Boston. Portsmouth, it's about 20 minutes north of Portsmouth in Durham, which is where UNH is located, which is also another cool thing. There's a lot of cool colleges, not just the ones that are south of us. We have Boston, MIT, Harvard, and then up here we have UNH, which is a huge school, and they're doing a lot of cool sort of Bitcoin and blockchain type of stuff there. So yeah, it's pretty convenient. It's a lot closer than PorcFest, which is in Lancaster. It's like 2.5 hours closer to Boston than that, so quite a bit more convenient. I know one thing with PorcFest, even for us living here, it's an awful far drive, and there isn't really many airports unless you have your own little private plane or something. It's not very easy to get to. So this is quite a bit easier. And also if somebody has a boat, it's really easy. They can even take their boat there, just park at the dock, and they'll be there. So we're hoping that we make every a lot of these different spaces reflect the personality of people involved. And in my personality, I'm very geeky, so there's a lot of be very friendly to like game. There'll be game rooms and game playing and just kind of the stuff that I think is cool, and I think a lot of the other people in the space think is cool. So hopefully it'll be something that people enjoy and we have fun. And same reason for the roundtables. I do these things. The original motivation is kind of sort of selfish. I just want an event that I would like. I'm not big on loud, big giant crowds. I'm a bit of an introvert, and I don't like, I go to consensus and I enjoy it, but there's some things that aren't my favorite about it. Whereas, being in small groups, kind of in the side, hallways, that's what I really enjoy. So we're trying to craft something that something that I would enjoy. And so from my own selfish standpoint, I just love, we've done a couple events already. We did one in March, and we've done this FSB DAX, Free State Blockchain Bitcoin Digital Assets Conference. It's in its third year now. And one thing I love is that I don't have to travel, so I just go right down. People tend to enjoy the town. Everybody loves New England and the touristy aspects and grabbing a lobster roll and hanging around in a relaxing environment. It's just sort of chill and fun and geeky, and it's the kind of event I would love to come to, and that's why we do it. And hopefully there's other people who have, at least it seems like it from the success of it. A lot of people come back, just like the roundtable. So at least maybe not everybody likes it, but at least some people come and say, oh, that's my kind of event too. And that's really what we're looking for, because then we all have fun and we have some great conversations and really enjoy ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've really enjoyed my time down in Mexico. That's been amazing. I'd love to be able to come out to this event in Portsmouth, but I can't because there's a Mondo New York, which is a tech conference coming up. And also, if you guys want to see me, I'll be in Bitbrum in Birmingham in November 3rd, which is out in the UK. But how often are you going to have these events then? Because I'd love to make it out to the next one.
Yeah, I think one of the things we probably would do is a couple over the summer. And then also the venue, we have access to this venue and we can give it to anybody free. So if you ever want to host something, or even if a listener does, they can reach out and we can see if we can schedule something. It's usually pretty flexible. That's one cool thing about it. So we can give somebody access to a free venue, particularly, like I say, if it's like 50 or less, it's really, really easy. And it's not so much about saving the money on the free venue. We're trying to make it a cool venue and a crypto-focused venue and caring about the crypto things that people care about, good security and fast Wi-Fi and these kind of things. So, we don't have any next one. The date isn't fixed yet, but we'll do that by by fourth quarter. We'll have a couple more, certainly over the summer. I think this time of year is kind of hard because there is so many other events. So we'll probably focus a little more on the summer, which, people are busy in the summer, but it might be sort of a fun thing. Everybody goes up to Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. They drive up. New Yorkers probably want to get out of the hot city, that kind of thing. So maybe we'll do at least one, maybe two over the summer. And, like I said, I'm hoping to open it to other people and get, I'd love to get somebody, some of the people who teach courses. There's a lot of people that teach classes and that kind of thing. It would be the perfect venue for that kind of thing. And we've also used it for private events too. We've done some of our own in-house, tech development. We'll have some developers come out. They stay at the cabin right at the farm, and it's kind of convenient and cool. And, just trying to build something that's sort of fun and good use of people's time. That's the bar that I always try to have with events that I say is better than if you would have stayed home. That's what I want to accomplish with it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that sounds awesome. So everybody can just stay on the site? Like a big slumber party, like a crypto slumber party?
Yeah, well, the more people, the less comfortable. There's a cabin with 3 rooms that could, if people are couples, you could have kind of 2 in each room. And then, there's plenty of room if people camp and things like that. It's not really, most of the time we'll probably have to rely on hotels or something like that. But you could kind of have maybe like a dozen people could probably sit on site. Or
you don't want a fire festival situation. That's what you said.
Yeah, no fire festival. We would have, wouldn't be suited for a real big event, and probably, if it's a few tents, that's no biggie. But if it's more than 50 people or something, or even 50 would be hard if they're right there. But there's plenty of hotels. That's the great thing about UNH, because there's so many students. They built a lot of hotels and stuff for graduation and things like that. So as long as it's not during homecoming or graduation week, there's tons of excess capacity in hotels that are right there. Even though it's a tiny little town in the middle of nowhere, you have these 300-room hotels. So it's pretty easy to get. And Portsmouth is pretty easy as well. There's a lot of hotels and of all different budget ranges. It's a big tourist area, so it's pretty, it's pretty easy. But it should, hopefully should be fun for people.
Awesome. Go ahead, Josh.
Sorry, I don't know if it's too late in the show for this, but I just wanted to bring it back because I found it very fascinating what you said about securities, and I know that you're a big fan of securities on the blockchain, or a blockchain, and I guess that's what Chainstone is all about, and your company. And the one thing that I find fascinating, that I've always found fascinating, is that, and that's why I've always sort of thought, I don't know if it works, like having shares on the blockchain. Let's go back to the example that you said, if Google offered their shares on the blockchain, or let's say Facebook, if Zuckerberg offered all of his shares and had them as blockchain assets, and then someone hacked him, does that mean he doesn't own Facebook anymore? Because then you'd need to go to a judge, and the judge would overturn the hack and give the rights back to him. But then, and then why do you need an immutable database? And for me, the answer was, in the end, was, well, it allows you to trade these things on independent exchanges all around the world. You're not stuck on NASDAQ, for instance, or whatever. And that's kind of the only thing I can think of. What would you say to that?
Yeah, that's part of it. It's, as far as the problem, that is a problem, for sure. Now, the interesting thing with securities is that you don't quite need the same level of immutability and trustlessness that you have with Bitcoin, because you already trust one party. You trust the issuer. So, and they're governed by law. So we don't have a worry. If you're an Apple shareholder, you're not that worried Apple's going to steal Tatiana's shares. They could, but she can sue them. They can't go, if Tatiana has Apple shares in her Charles Schwab account, they can't just take it. They can't, no matter what, she can go out and badmouth Tim Cook. She could sue Apple. There's almost nothing that they can do, because shareholder rights, despite all the, challenges we have in our legal system, one thing we are pretty good about in the United States is property rights, and particularly when it comes to the stock market. It's actually very, very hard for Apple to steal somebody's shares. And that's not really your worry. If you're worried Apple's going to steal your shares, you don't buy Apple. So it's not so much that we're solving for issuer trust, but what we're solving for is the third-party trust, because the one who runs the ledger now isn't Apple. Apple doesn't know who their shareholders are, and it isn't Charles Schwab either. Charles Schwab only knows who their Schwab account is. Fidelity only knows who the Fidelity account is. And Fidelity and Schwab don't share it with each other, and neither of them share it with Merrill Lynch, because they're all competitors. The last thing in the world they would ever do is tell their competitor how many shares Tatiana has in her Schwab account. So who has the ledger? If it's not Apple, and if it's not the banks or the brokers, then who is it? Well, in the United States, it's this group called DTCC, which they did that for exactly that reason, because it used to be bearer assets and used to have physical shares, and it became very, very cumbersome by the 60s. They actually had to shut the stock exchange early, which they never, ever want to do because it's a lot of money. They actually had to shut the exchanges early for several years in the 60s, and even close some days just to catch up on all the shares, because volumes were increasing and they couldn't physically move these shares around. They were ringing around by bicycle and armored car, and they just physically couldn't do it anymore. So they said, we're not going to trust each other with the ledger, and the issuer doesn't have the capability or interest in managing the ledger, because remember, it's millions of trades every day. So they came up with this idea and said, okay, we're going to create this depository trust company. We're all going to trust it. And hundreds of brokers all agreed, said, okay, we'll trust this group with the ledger. They're not a competitor of us. They're not owned by us. They're their own independent thing. We don't like it, but at least we'll trust them to say what's true. And that's been the case to this day. So you still have this group called DTCC in the United States, Euroclear in Europe, and there's different versions of it all over the world because the same problem exists everywhere where you have this scaling issue to say who actually owns what. And the cool thing about a blockchain is the blockchain can say who owns what. It can say who owns an asset. And, so that's what you're solving for. Now, the drawback of DTCC is that because you have 350 major parties who don't trust each other and millions of transactions and everything going through, it creates a bottleneck, which is why it's very, very hard for you to move your shares. Even going from one broker to another, even going from Charles Schwab to Merrill Lynch, it takes 10 days. 10 days because they've got to go back into this system and nobody really knows what they have. There's a famous case with Dole Foods. When Dole was acquired, more people came forward and had shares than they thought existed. I think it was 30. They thought there was 32 million, 40 million shares. And if you read the fine print on your brokerage agreement, you don't actually own your shares because not to make it too complex, but to make it, what happened with DTCC ran into a scaling problem, and then they couldn't even scale, and they couldn't even keep track of who owned it. So in 1996, they came up with this thing and said, well, we're not going to have anybody on it. We're going to have one company on it, and they invented a new company called CD & Co. And they said CD & Co. is going to own all the stocks. So when you buy a stock at a United States brokerage firm, you actually don't really have a stock. You have a claim on the stock, which you claim through DTCC, and then DTCC has it through CD, and then it goes through. And there's a lot of doom and gloom talk that there's a big conspiracy or something. That's not so much the thing that it's so much about the shenanigans, although there is some shenanigans and there's a lot of, there's some corruption and other issues. But the real problem is just efficiency. It's just that it takes a week or 10 days to move these things, and it's really, really difficult to move things overseas. I mean, how many Americans do you know who own a Japanese stock or a Chinese stock? Chinese people own IBM, almost none. It's very, very difficult. So with a simple ERC20 token or some token that you issue on a blockchain, you can move it. Now, so that's the good news. We can solve this very real problem with the blockchain. The bad news is what you just said. You can't really make it a bearer asset like Bitcoin or a counterparty token because of the issue that you have with, well, what if Zuckerberg gets hacked? And in the old days, they used to deal with that. You could prove that your shares were stolen, and then the issuer would cancel and reissue them, which isn't a huge thing. I mean, as a cypherpunk or as a Bitcoiner, the first thing is, oh my gosh, central control. It's like, well, like I say, it's already central. Apple is not going to come and just steal your shares because you could sue them for $1 billion and you'd win. It never happens. Have you ever heard of any American who's like, oh man, Microsoft, I had my Microsoft in my retirement account and they stole it from me? No, it doesn't really happen. So there is some issues. This whole issue about, is it a bearer asset? Is it not? It's not really a bearer asset, which means you need somebody to have some kind of ledger, which brings us right back to the first problem again. But the good news is with smart contracts, hopefully that can be solved as well. And at least, even if you have a centralized ledger somewhere, at least you're able to move it quicker because it's a blockchain based asset. You can move it in minutes rather than weeks. And that alone, if all this accomplishes is it just makes it so that I can move my stock in a day rather than 10 days, and I can now have from China or Japan or UK in my account. That would be an incredible change for the markets. And because it brings down these barriers to entry and the ability, we could have a lot more things publicly traded. I'd love to have my local Indian restaurant that I eat at every week publicly traded with tiny little stock, and I could buy $100 worth of the stock, and we could trade little tiny startups, and you could own a little bit of your friend's business. And it's not practical these days. Nobody does anything with a startup unless it's $50,000 or so because it's just not even worth the legal effort, and there's no logistics that anybody would have to manage the ledger. But if you could go to a small startup and they can outsource that one crucial piece of managing the ledger to a blockchain, that solves a real problem. So that's what I think is exciting about the securities world. But it has a long way to go.
I think the longest way to go is really the actual law, because there's some of these the SEC or here the BaFin in Germany, they're expecting a few people to come in and register their securities, but if they do not stop with this power grab or at least make it very simple to register a security, they're going to be just inundated. There's no possible way. It's like if we said, every time you need a website up, you need to go and get a license for that website. it would just take far too long, and you would just, I mean, it's just an impossibility. And for the eventuality of, you know, trading your local Indian restaurant, which I think is a fantastic idea, and the scams get priced into it, and we start educating the populace of what a scam looks like again, because I feel that the government has de-risked us as a population so long that we can't even, we look at one coin and go, oh, that's great. You know, we're so desensitized to what scams looks like because we've been protected too long. And so I think it's a long tail game where we need to educate each other. We need to demand transparency, and this is why, you know, I was so obsessed with exchange transparency after Mt. Gox and really focused on the glass books protocol that we implemented on Vaultoro, is to force people, not to force people, to recommend and to educate people to not use exchanges that aren't transparent, to start looking at what is a scam properly. And this is the other thing, why, going right back to the beginning, to bring it all back, is why I think the word scam needs to be really, you know, used properly, because it's really an educational process that we're in now as a society to say, look, we have these bearer-based instruments, or we have these digital tokens that can be eventually the stock of your local Indian restaurant. And it can also be the scam coin for some crap scam. And here is the typical modus operandi of a scam or a Ponzi scheme and how they work, so you can start to identify them quickly without some trusting some central authority who is just far too inefficient to be able to give people the yay or nay on these projects.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's and the avoiding scams, it comes with financial literacy. The more people know. I'd love to see more people buy stock. I was probably starting early in my career, '92. I was just on as stockbrokers were dying out. I was there when kind of the last of the stockbrokers, and I sort of started as a stockbroker, but there is no stockbrokers anymore. Everybody became financial advisors, and nobody really owns stocks anymore. What they do is they own an advisory thing that has a fee, and it's a wrap account, and then there's another entity that manages the wrap account, and then that entity buys mutual funds. And then the mutual fund has a fund manager, and the fund manager buys the stocks. And people are very far removed from it. I'd like to see people own stocks, because when they own stuff, then they start to say, in the early days of my career, people were like, hey, what's Caterpillar doing right now? What is McDonald's doing right now? Is it expanding? How is it dealing with demographic trends? Who's the CEO? People cared about these things. I'd love to see people have their net worth invested in things where they're a little closer to their money. And you cut out a lot, because every layer that I just mentioned, the wrap account and the manager and the investment advisor and the fund company, they all have they're all taking their piece and tacking on extra fees, and they end up all owning the same stocks anyway. So I'd like to see people, if you could tokenize those, buy those same stocks directly, and then also have more stocks in your local startups. Not tons of money, but maybe $100 here and there if you make it easy and seamless. And then you have a nice portfolio, and then you say, oh, are they doing good business? Are they not doing business? Is Walmart's sales increasing? Should I sell Walmart? Maybe I don't like Walmart because I have a social issue. I don't like that company or something. And then people can be kind of more advocates for themselves and their own money. And that would be, and have it global and have it be all over the place. So maybe you buy, maybe the little Indian restaurant or my local pizza house, maybe some Chinese billionaire wants a portfolio of American pizza houses or something like that. There's a lot of exciting things you can do. Equity in stocks is a really beautiful, wonderful, voluntary form of exchange, and it's a core of economics, but we've kind of forgotten about it. Even though it's trillions of dollars, nobody really owns stocks anymore. It's all through these entities, and nobody holds it. And I think it'd be better if we just bring that closer to the people a little bit more, and then it goes right in line with, once people are saying, like, what's their balance sheet look like? Who's the CEO? What's the earnings? That also helps avoid scams, because it leads to the overall financial literacy part of it.
Absolutely. And to wrap that up as well, is that, we as a company, we've been operating for 5 years, but we found it very, very inefficient to seek VC money. We have a VC on board, but it was so extraordinarily a big waste of time because it just took far too long. It was so inefficient that we couldn't focus on the core business. We had to focus on actually talking to VC, like heaps of VCs. We had to, get intros first, and then like everything just takes forever. And to be able to properly crowdfund, of course, that takes time as well, of course. But to be able to take for instance, when Kickstarter. When Oculus Rift had their Kickstarter campaign, which Kickstarter is just for funsies, like, oh yeah, I want to support this project because I really want VR to take off. And this was before VR really took off. And these people, all they got was a version 1 of the crappiest Oculus thing, test thing. And then Oculus went on to sell to Facebook for, I think it was like $13 billion. None of those original backers saw any of that success. None of them could take part in that success. All they got was their crappy version 0001 alpha headset. And this is the sort of exciting thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it could be really exciting, and it would solve exactly those kind of issues.
Wow, you guys are really into this topic. I think that was awesome overview and a little bit even under the hood. Really great perspective, Bruce. Thank you so much. You can learn about these perspectives and others from leaders in the crypto industry in New Hampshire. Can you give us a quick plug for where people can find out more information?
Sure. So if you go to satoshiroundtable.org or blockchainnh.com, either of those sites has details on these events. There's this side table, which is kind of like a small focused discussion, just exactly the little conversation we had, just hours and hours of with small groups. That's on October 17th and 18th. And then the 19th, which is a Saturday, is this, bigger community. And by bigger, it's still a small event, probably 50, 75 people kind of thing, but a bigger community sort of meetup style event on October 19th in New Hampshire as well. So and people are welcome for sure.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bruce, for making the time today. We appreciate it. And I had one other question. So I have an episode of Proof of Love with Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert, and she actually asked, what was, the show is called Proof of Love. So she wanted to know a little bit about what's going on with your son and how you prove your love in that situation, if you don't mind telling us. I know you've been kind of posting about it.
Sure. It's interesting. We're usually very private, and we didn't even disclose we had kids, and my son was selling his Bitcoin mugs. A lot of people, you're on his website as one of his customers. He's been selling these mugs for a while, and kind of people in my circle knew he was my son. But other than that, I didn't even really say he was my son. We even gave him a fake name. His real name is Alexander, but we called him AC, which was kind of his Bitcoin name, just because we're so private. But last year he needed brain surgery, and we were more public about it just because I feel like he's a member of the community and he has all of these friends and people care about him, and we needed all the support we could get. And so he had a surgery last year, and then he had another surgery this year for basically his skull was shaped wrong. So, sort of this part of the skull pushing into the brain in a way that you can't have it. So it's totally, absolutely mandatory to get it done. So this year he had a pretty serious surgery. He had to go in and have be put in traction and have a immobility halo, and then be immobilized in a bed for 7 days, not able to move with this 6 screws screwed into his head, pulling his head up by a weight for 7 days. And that's just the prep for the next surgery, where they go in and they actually went into the brainstem and put these pins, basically these screws, like 1.5 inch screws, into a metal plate in the back of his head, and fused the top 3 vertebrae so that his spinal fluid is flowing. And so that was quite an experience. So then, another week in the hospital. So we were in the PICU for living at the hospital for 2 weeks, and he's been a real champ going through this. He's doing well, and in fact today he's getting the halo off after 7 weeks. So he's had this metal cage around his head for 7 weeks. So it's pretty serious, but it's been like anything. He's gained the wisdom of. Boy, you should see him. He's got kind of the wisdom of a 30-year-old now. There's been some really, I think, beautiful learning things about it in looking at this especially living in the hospital there for a couple of weeks, I saw everything. I was there my wife was there 24/7, and I would go and rest at the hotel for the very evening and then come back. But, I saw everything. I saw all kinds of injuries and all kinds of different people going through hardships, usually very positive things. Most people are there, they're overjoyed because, modern science is so good. Most people are doing okay. And I guess my biggest takeaway is just kind of like, life is it's a never-ending grind, and it's hard, and everybody is in some sort of situation like that someday. I walked by the geriatric ward, and there's these people, I don't know what it was, but it was, they were obviously very, very serious cases, and they were very, very, very elderly people. And I said, well, that's the best case. That's what we could all hope for. Many of us won't even be lucky to be them, but even if we're lucky enough to be them, think of all the misery that they've had, all the hard times, and all the stresses that they've had. And that's just life. Life is this grind, and you've got to just say, this is what it is. And you find the beauty in life. There's a lot of beauty and there's a lot of love as well. And everybody has their stuff. Everybody has their tragedy. Everybody has their issue. Doesn't matter how rich or poor you are. But I have clients who are billionaires, and when they get later in their life, none of those billions would matter if they could just have a few more years. And so it kind of puts things in perspective and makes you, really appreciate some of these things that are the flip side of it is that life is a real challenge and it's a grind. But the flip side is it's a grind for everybody. And we've still, as humanity and humans, been able to find beauty and love in this crazy chaos that we have. And we find art and music and all these wonderful things that we can have us do to help us get through it and learn it on together, I guess.
Wow, Bruce, what an amazing family you guys are. That's just really inspiring. I totally agree with it. My sister's currently going through a brain tumor situation, and it's tough. It's tough, but you grow so much more being able to. And I had a heart surgery years ago, open heart, and you really. Being able to touch death, you come out of that with this new appreciation for life, and it's amazing because I've had friends that have just died of a heart attack and they didn't have that chance to have touched death and walk away and have this new vision of life and this new respect for loved ones and for life in general. And so, that's that. Like you said, if you can be geriatric, then
it brings you back to appreciate it. You're just like you say, if you never know, a year and a half ago, a year last summer, I was sitting minding my own business, doing my thing, worried about, what crypto prices were. And then we found out, and then instantly, 3 weeks later, we're in there having brain surgery and, waiting for 6 hours for the surgery. And then it was the most stressful time ever. And then when the surgery's a success, I was more happy than I'd ever been in my life. And if I wouldn't have, you would have, if 3 weeks earlier, you would have said, yeah, Bruce, you're going to have a 3 weeks of hell. You're going to stop. Every single project that you're working on is going to be completely canceled, and you're not even going to be focused on the projects, and you're not even going to care about these stupid crypto prices, and you're not going to have any sleep, and you're going to have a lot of stress. But 3 weeks from today, you're going to be overjoyed, and your son's going to be recovering for a couple months from some serious. I was like, huh? That doesn't sound like something to be overjoyed about, but it is. The joy is right there in the world, and you can go and, as the old cliche is, go hug somebody that you care about, because, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah. It's a very stoic way of looking at it.
And it's one of the things that I thought about a lot, maybe it's something with maturity, maybe, and some people reach this maturity earlier. Some people are very lucky. They don't get touched by hardship, for most of their life. But, you see these themes, and I see things different. I listen to, the hymns that people sung a long time ago. This historic farm is, the farm that I mentioned is really interesting because it has a lot of neat history, which I won't go into. But, going back, there's all kinds of crazy things that happen with settlers, and it's been occupied by humans for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I've walked around there, looking around, thinking about, the incredible hardship. They had a Native Americans attacked and killed a bunch of people just around the corner. And I think, the hardships that people before us have gone through, we're not unique. We just have a different set of problems that we care about. But everybody in the whole world, of every race, nationality, forever, going back thousands of years, have all had these kind of hardships. And, you see that people have dealt with it and made the best of it. And some of the greatest art that's ever been made has been made from real pain. The artist has gone through their own pain and they're going through struggle. And then 100 years later, we can enjoy that art when we're going through struggles. I think that's amazing.
Awesome
Wonderfully.
show, guys. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all these different perspectives with us and a little bit about your family life. And I don't know, if you guys want to check out more of the Tatiana Show, go to thetatianashow.com. Please share this show with your friends. Maybe give us a review on iTunes. And we're on all the social media networks. So the Tatiana Show comes out on Tuesdays, sometimes Thursdays, or other random days. And then on Friday, we have Proof of Love, which is a show I host with Stephanie Murphy and Lauren Kasovitz. And it's about relationships, emotional intelligence, personal development, different kinds of stuff like that. So hope you guys can tune in there. We just did an episode with Jimmy Song, which was cool. Tone also joined us for that, so that was fun. That was a long episode. Anyway, cool. This was a great show. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
By the way,
much.
just quickly also, I used to be at Voltoro, but I gave it over to the company because I was too radical. No, I wasn't too radical. But,
yes,
just
you
for more
were. That's
company.
exactly why. That's exactly the reason.
And I've gone by my Twitter handle now is Jay Shigala, which is my name, Joshua Shigala, Jay Shigala. So follow us there and hope to see you around.
Cool. Well,
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Take care. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. We gotta think and reflect and use lots of intellect with our hearts when we work together. I know that it can be so hard out there, looking all around and saying that life ain't fair. So that is why we will fight and stay up late at night, listening to the Tatiana Show. Thank you for listening to the Tatiana Show. Please follow us on Twitter at Queen Tatiana or on Facebook and Instagram at Tatiana Moroz Music. More episodes can be found at thetatianashow.com, and make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. The Tatiana Show has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond.